Nowadays, everything is a commodity. Rides, our communication to our cast members, our employees at Disney is rides and shows. People can get those anywhere. It's the experience that you create through those rides and shows and restaurants and so forth. That's the driver of that intense loyalty. So at Disney, it was everything from the arrival process to purchasing tickets to the transportation into the park, entering the park itself, waiting in line. All of those things have a massive impact on the guest experience there. Whatever that experience that you've defined, whatever that is, you want it to permeate every aspect.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. And on the Keynote Curators podcast, we welcome our guests to share with us their wealth of experience, insights, and transformational ideas that are going to make a difference for you in your profession and your personal life. Our guest today is Dennis Snow. Dennis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be participating.
We are thrilled to have you. Dennis, you began on the front lines at Disney, and we're going to get into that journey, and you're going to share everything and anything that's important to our viewers about it. And at the end of this video or this podcast, all of our viewers are going to have a stronger, better idea of all things that have to do with Disney, customer experience, service-focused culture that can truly set you apart. So let's get started here. Dennis, customer service lessons that you learned from your early days at Disney that you use to this day and how companies can apply them right away to grow their businesses. The floor is yours. Share away.
Okay. Well, yeah, my background with Disney, I worked there for 20 years. And I started out on the front lines, as you said. It's actually an attraction that isn't there anymore. It was called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It was a simulated submarine ride. So my claim to fame is I drove a submarine that didn't really go underwater. That's what I did. And then I managed various operating areas and had several different roles around the company. Here's the biggest takeaway for me, and this is the thing over the last 25 years. What I've tried to share with my clients is nowadays everything is a commodity. Rides, our communication to our cast members, our employees at Disney is rides and shows. People can get those anywhere. It's the experience that you create through those rides and shows and restaurants and so forth. That's the driver of that intense loyalty. So when you change that mindset from a product or service mindset, what product are we offering? What service are we offering? To what's the experience that we're offering? It's a very different mindset. You start looking at all of the different touch points. So at Disney, it was everything from the arrival process to purchasing tickets to the transportation into the park, entering the park itself, waiting in line. All of those things have a massive impact on the guest experience there. And so that's what we tried to focus in on, is how do we elevate each of those experiences? So what I do with clients is the same thing. And it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant, a hotel, a retail store. There are multiple processes and multiple touch points in all of those interactions. And the opportunity is, how do we take each of those up a notch so that the overall experience is one that people say, I don't know exactly what it was, but I sure want to do business with them again.
Yeah, I mean, it's the journey, right? The customer journey, and then having them at the end be so thrilled and enthralled and overwhelmed that it's an automatic for them to want to come back, which is a lot of the experience that Disney has. The repetition of people coming back is off the charts.
Right. And I would say, I would never say Disney gets it right every time. They make mistakes, just like every company does, but they really do have a strong focus on creating that overall experience. And I think when you start looking at it from this perspective, it takes away that idea of we have just got to dazzle people, go out of our way and spend a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous time so we can dazzle people. I don't think that's necessary. I think if you look at all of those touch points and you just take it up a notch, the overall feeling is, wow, that was really amazing. When in reality, it was a series of little things, just greeting people with a smile. That doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take any more time, but it was just that little extra that you're not used to getting. Acknowledging people's kids. That was one of the things that I used to do when I worked in the park is just, see a child with the Mickey Mouse ears on and say, oh, I look on the back of them and say, hey, Bobby, how are you? And didn't take any time, didn't take any money, but it just took it up a notch. And those things add up. The statement that I use a lot when I'm presenting is little wows add up.
Yeah.
And so
sure
it's not about the huge, grandiose gestures. It's those little things that you do consistently.
It's the other side of the coin. The other side of that coin would be death by 1,000 cuts, like the little impediments. But the other side of that coin is little mini wows, micro wows really do add up.
And I like that, micro wows.
Yeah, micro wows, but they breathe life into the experience. Dennis, you and I have worked together. You've done a fantastic job for my clients. And
thank you. I've enjoyed working with you all. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. And what you just kind of laid out are fantastic insights. First of all, most of them are free, and I'm sure there's a whole boatload more that you could share. Our audience are not only meeting professionals. A large volume of our podcast listeners are meeting professionals and producers and marketers and meeting planners, business owners as well. I'd like to welcome them and just remind them to subscribe and ring the bell and make sure that you're tracking us to get these kind of insights from experts like Dennis. And in the comments below, share some of the customer experiences you've had, both positive and negative, to generate a conversation around how we can all improve and better our experience for the people that we're serving. You talk about the human element of it because there's rides and restaurants and you can get the best chefs and the best designers. And it does get reduced down to that human element. And this has been a through line, if you will, in our podcast. Here's a question. In today's social media world that's saturated and overabsorbed with, customer loyalty being more fickle and the attention span being shorter and shorter, in your view, Dennis, how do companies leverage that, whether it's a social media presence or in any other way, to build that brand awareness, that brand advocacy, those brand ambassadors?
Well, I think part of the answer is you can't rely on just one channel. This has got to apply in every single thing that you do, whether it's your social media approach, your traditional marketing approach, what happens in your location. It has to be consistent. So when people see something on social media and then they go to your location and there's a disconnect, that's going to be a dissatisfier. And they're going to put that back on social media. It's going to work against you. So the consistency, and again, I don't want to say Disney does it perfectly, but what they do is they've got a foundational philosophy that permeates everything. So that it's a Disney experience, whether it's a movie, whether it's the park, whether you're online, you're playing a video game, that Disney brand shines through. And what I would recommend to people is having a clear understanding of what you want your brand to be. And so what does that look like? What does that sound like? So if you have that clear idea, that then you can weave into everything. When I work with consulting clients, I always start off as what are 3 things you would want your customers to say about their experience with you? Because that's really your brand. What people say or think about you. That's really your brand. So that then gives you something to say. All right, then what has to happen in our organization in order for our customers to say those things? And it becomes pretty clear then what those activities, what those behaviors that can then permeate all the different channels through which we interact with people. But then as leaders, we can take it another step And are we hiring people that are wired to do those things? That's just part of their makeup. Are we onboarding people into our organization in a way that reflects those values, reflects that brand essence that we're trying to perpetuate? Are we communicating relentlessly with our people around those things? And so it goes back to those fundamental, what do we want the experience to be? And then you weave that into everything that you do.
In the end, you're talking about having clarity at the foundational level, right? What do you see with companies that you come in? Because I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're brought in because things aren't, let's say, not working as well as they would like them to. A company is
Right. Yeah.
generating revenue, they're producing results, but
Uh-huh.
maybe they feel like they're not thriving on all cylinders, or they want to up their level, or they've gotten feedback and they acknowledge that things can be improved. What is the source of not having that foundational clarity? In other words, what are people doing or omitting to lack that clarity?
They haven't taken the step back to say, what do we want the experience to be? They focus in on the product. How do we get the product out there? How do we get the service out there? Which is important. I mean, you have to do that. But if you don't then define what's our essence, what's the experience we're trying to create, what is our brand, what's the brand territory we want to own in the mind of a customer, then you've missed what's going to really capture the heart of people. And so that's where I see the real gap out there is a lot of times we just haven't taken the time or put in the effort to define this. And so what happens then is you have a group of employees, regardless of how big or small the organization is, you have a group of employees who are really just making it up as they go along. Because there's no
guiding principles
to it.
And if I may add, there's so much pressure. Not only are they making it up as they go along, they're making it up really quickly.
Yeah. It's funny. I worked with a call center one time, and one of the representatives, I was doing some focus groups and everything. One of the representatives said, "Well, the thing that we're really held accountable for is call time. How many calls in a day can we do? So call time." And said, "So what we do is if a call is going long, we just disconnect the call. Because we know when the person calls back, they're going to end up with another agent. It's not going to come back to me. So my numbers look good, but I haven't satisfied the customer because all we're held accountable for is the call volume, the number of calls we handle." That's a real problem. So what was missing there is what we're doing in a help center is we're trying to help people. That's really what we're doing. But unless you are very clear on what that sounds like, what that looks like, you're just leaving it up to chance.
And we don't want to do that. For our listeners and our viewers of this podcast, thanks for being with us. The new ones that have joined us, thank you for choosing to be with us. If you like what we're discussing, make sure you subscribe, make sure you click the bell so you can follow us and don't miss out on future content like this and so much more. Dennis, I want to take this idea of this customer service to, we've been talking about it, the people that we're serving, that are receiving this service, this product.
Right.
But what about the internal, the teams, the high performing, the people that are going to go the extra mile, walk through fire for you? What do you have to say to them in the context of service?
People who serve other people within the organization.
Sure. Or I'm a leader. I'm accountable for my team. I'm a master servant, servant master, call it what you like. We're so focused on the people that are visiting the park to use the Disney and their whole through line and their journey. Internally, we're serving.
Yeah, and that's critical. I have yet to work with an organization that really gives great external service if their internal service stinks. It's really hard. You might be able to pull that off in the short term, but it's not going to last. So the thing with Disney is that those fundamental expectations that I talked about apply no matter what role you have in the company. So if you're if your job is like my wife, Debbie, she started working at Disney in the costume
Does
area.
everybody,
So what
excuse
she
me,
did
does
was
everybody
she,
in your family, is there a requirement to have the first letter of their first name start with D, or am I missing something?
yeah, you
Because your
picked up
boy
on
is
that. Yeah.
Danny.
Debbie,
Your
Dennis,
boy is
Danny, and
Danny.
David. Yeah. We got another one
Oh,
named David,
goodness.
and then my wife is
Okay.
Debbie. Yeah. Now this was not my idea. Okay. This was I don't want to blame it on
Yeah,
Debbie,
yeah,
but it
but
was not
you
my idea.
accepted it
Uh,
in the context of service.
you're right. That's right. I know what, where to
That's
back
right.
down. And um, so what was I saying? The internal
Yes.
service. Everybody's expected to follow those principles. A lot of times, and they don't come right out and say this, but I'll work with a company and people in behind the scenes areas. They'll say, I'm so glad I don't have to work with customers anymore. Well, they do. Their customers are other people within the organization. So if you don't have the same standards for the way we treat people within the organization as the way we treat people that are guests or customers of the organization, that's a massive disconnect. And you're going to end up with an us versus them culture. If only they would do things the way they should do them type of culture. So the values, the standards really have to be consistent across the organization. When it comes to the management side, I think that our responsibility as leaders is we need to be the cheerleaders of the guest or customer experience. People need to look at us as that's the model. That's my all. And I wish I could show it. My all time favorite Disney photograph is a photograph of Walt Disney. It's probably around 1959. Black, it's a black and white photo, and somebody captured a photo of him picking up trash off the ground at Disneyland. He's picking up popcorn, boxes and so forth. That is better than any training program you could put somebody through. If you're a new cast member or employee at Disneyland, you look over and there's Walt Disney picking up trash. That's a pretty powerful message. So I think as leaders, that's our job, is to be reflecting those values, to be reflecting those behaviors that we expect. Um, because people know, our employees know when there's a disconnect there, when leaders are not practicing what they preach. And I've seen, and you've seen that. We've all seen that many, many times, and it's frustrating for people. But when it's there, it's okay. We're all in this together, and that's a really strong message. So I guess my point to the folks listening and watching would be, whatever that experience that you've defined, whatever that is, you want it to permeate every aspect of the organization.
Yeah, you're preaching to the preacher, but I think whether it's internal or the outward facing client that's receiving the service and product, you do feel it. Maybe not all the time, but in that one where there's a breakdown, how the breakdown is handled and how
Yeah.
the rest of the team shows up is pretty.
You bring up
Go
that.
ahead.
No, that's an excellent point. Is what ends up happening in that scenario is we start blaming other entities in the company to the customer. We'll start saying, well, the salesperson shouldn't have told you that, or they're all new over there, they've got high turnover. We start blaming other entities. And that's a strong indicator that the internal service is not aligned with what we want the external service to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for making my day and telling me it was an excellent point. I feel like I am undeserved of a gold star from a master keynoter.
Put one in the win column. You got one in the win column.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, hey, I'll take it. That was a
Yeah.
big victory for me. That might run me through the new year. So again, to our listeners, Dennis, who are again meeting professionals and business owners, if you're enjoying this discussion, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, because you're going to continue to get incredible anecdotes and tips and insights into how to optimize your performance and your experience and everything that you do, whether it's personally or professionally. Dennis, I want to not take a hard turn, but put the spotlight a little bit on the event sphere, if you will, the event business.
Sure. Yeah.
Because again, attendees could be considered the customer from the
Oh, yeah.
meeting producer, meeting professional point of view.
Mhm.
But they then have their own internal vendor teams, whether it's transportation, security, food and beverage, hotels, sound, et cetera, et cetera. You've been to so many, you know. How do you see this as a critical topic for event planners? That is customer service and the whole sphere, the whole event sphere.
Sure. I think that, you're going to, in a lot of events, you're going to be ordering buses. You're going to have name tags. You're going to have seating. You're going to have audio visual. You're going to have things in the hotel rooms. There's so many. I have all the respect in the world for meeting planners because I don't think most people really appreciate what they really do because there's so many moving parts. But I think that in addition to, okay, we've got to order the buses, we're going to order the lunch. What do we want the participant to feel at each of those touch points? When they arrive to the venue, when they're at the registration desk, when they first walk into the ballroom, when they walk into their hotel room, what's the feeling we want them to have at each of these things? So let's say, it's the registration desk. We want them to feel like they're welcome. We want them to feel like we knew they were coming. Okay, so then what has to happen in order for that participant to feel that way? So you drill it down to the behaviors, of the person welcoming people onto the bus that's going to transport them to another venue. What's the feeling we want them to have when they arrive at the bus? You're at the right place. We're going to the place that you think we're going to. We're glad that you're here. Okay, so then what has to happen in order for the customer to feel that or the participant to feel that way? So that's how I think this really fits, is that there's still that experience mentality throughout the entire event. And the ones that I've been to that, I would say, wow, that was really a great meeting, a great conference, is when it was seamless. You felt like it was all part of a seamless experience. It was all part of this one idea that we're trying to create here. Versus I've been to others, and I know everybody has, where there's a bunch of disconnects. It feels like you're working with a bunch of different entities and nobody really knows what the other one's doing. And yeah, you might get to where you're going and, the show goes on, but it just doesn't feel, you know what I mean? It just doesn't feel right. But I think it goes back to that initial thinking. What do we want the participant to feel at each of these touch points?
At the Keynote Curators, we have an experience in mind for our buyers, which are mostly meeting professionals. Sometimes they're from the marketing arm of the organization or an event production company. But we start at the end and work backwards, just like you're sharing with Disney. So at the Keynote Curators, when we propose speakers, before we even get to a list or ideas or if they fit in the fee range or the topic or the theme, we really partner up and do consultative conversations. It could be via email, it could be via text, it could be a Zoom. Try to get under the hood and understand what it is that they want so that when the speaker gets mic'd up and they're on the stage or wherever they are presenting and what's being delivered hits the mark. But what's even more important for us is that the whole experience of our client, our buyer, our end user of our service is one of delight, and that they feel it's smooth, that we're almost invisible and things are moving along without us having to intervene. And if the case does arrive where we have to intervene, it's handled in a way that's a quick response, a correspondingly accurate, precise fix, and things move on. And it's not enough of an interruption where the show gets stopped. So, I've taken the lessons that you've espoused over the years, delivering world-class customer service experience, lessons from the mouse, which is what you emphasize. You're moving from a task mindset.
Right. It's the
Right
title
out
of
of
my
the book,
book.
from a task mindset to an experience mindset. Experience, there's a lot of micro tasks under that. But if you're aware of that experience, explain to our audience, I know it could be a whole keynote speech, Dennis, how that mindset shift can create those unforgettable experiences for their attendees.
Yeah, and you used a term earlier that I think is right on in terms of those micro behaviors. So think about working at an event. That you're working the desk or whatever role that you have at the event. At the beginning, there's a lot of energy, right? We're excited. It's day one. People are coming in, and at that point, it's pretty easy, to be friendly and welcome people. Now it's day four. And it's been it's the end of day four. Sometimes you see a very different dynamic going on. The real professionals, the ones that really have it down, are the ones that recognize this has to be consistent throughout. It doesn't matter, if it's day four. We would tell people at Disney, you might have answered the same question 1,000 times this week. This guest is asking it for the first time. And you're always on stage. You're always on stage. And that was a key philosophy. You never let backstage come on stage. You never say, oh, God, I've been working all day. I'm exhausted. The guests don't want to hear that. They want to hear that, the show is on. It's magic. And so that's where I think the discipline comes into play. And I hate to keep going back to it, but what do we want the experience to be? That's got to run through the whole thing. It's got to run through the whole thing. And again, that's where you have to really step up and say, no, the show is on.
I love that. Don't let backstage come to the front of the stage because, so I remind event production teams and even my own meeting planners, because I go on site a lot and there might be some swirl going on. The power goes out. I've had power goes out at major convention centers. It's not like you're hiding it, but be responsible in a way and govern it in a way where it's not bleeding out to the front. They don't know that the hair and makeup person is late, or the mic that the speaker put on, the battery's out right before they go on. They don't know any of that. They're just there to get what was promised to be delivered. So I just love that comment.
Yeah. And sometimes you can actually come out stronger the way you handle things, because things do happen.
Totally. Yeah.
I know, with AV crews, I've worked with some fabulous AV crews where we have an agreement where, I'm wearing a wireless lavalier microphone, and sometimes something happens, they lose their connection, whatever it may, every now and then. It doesn't happen often, but it happens. Well, we have an agreement that I'll then go to the podium and use the podium mic, and then they'll bring up a handheld wireless, and it's very seamless. And when a participant sees that happen, there's a sense of trust. There's a sense of, okay, these folks really have it together. Now, some of that certainly comes from experience, of just having gone through mics going out and things. But the other side of it is just thinking through, what are those things that can go wrong? What are those things that can go wrong? And how do we want to handle them? You talked about the backstage thing. One of the things that I think applies in the meetings world, it applies in any world. Imagine going to Disney World with your child, your precious child, and she's wearing her Disney princess costume, which is very popular there. The little girls that will dress up as a princess, got the autograph book, is in the park, sees Cinderella, runs over to Cinderella and tugs on her dress to get her autograph. And Cinderella turns around and she has a cigarette in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other hand, and says, "Kid, I'm on break." What would be the impact? There would probably be years of therapy involved, but it all collapses because backstage just came on stage. And so one of the things I challenge clients to think about, and participants in programs, is, in your world, what are those potential smoking Cinderella behaviors? Smoking Cinderella situations where backstage creeps on stage, where, okay, that was a disconnect from what we're trying to create here. And people, that tends to stick with people, that smoking Cinderella image. But it's a powerful one because it happens. And we see it happen all the time.
No, it's a great anecdote, great analogy. And if it's not a cup of coffee, she's holding a martini, which is even worse, right?
Right. Well, that's a different,
that's a different kind of therapy too.
That's universal. Right. That's universal.
Exactly. That's another company, not to be named now,
right.
Universal. Well, Dennis, we have come to the end of this episode.
Wow.
It's time flew by. We like to, leave a little bit on the table. I feel that we love to have you back at some point.
Yeah, I love it.
To our audience, we appreciate you when you join us because we know you come for insights and information and thoughts that can make a difference, again, in your personal or professional life. In this case, we're bringing you customer service insights from one of the legends in the industry. And if you like this interview, make sure to watch our other interviews, our other episodes as well. You're going to learn from us. We appreciate you coming here to be smarter. And if you want to share this episode with anybody and everybody, please do so. And we'll see you next time.